How we doing, folks? Here we are on week 6 branding, part 2 branding, and we're going to work on some questions. Let me see how I can be helpful here. Questions. If companies in the U.S. used clout to organize small gatherings as the French people do you think this type of interaction would work in the U.S.? Well, absolutely positively. And I'm telling you right now that U.S. companies already do use clout to try to do, as I said in the previous video, a Malcolm Gladwell, find influencers and get the influencers to help spread the word virally. Yes, for those of us who just want a quick primer on clout, I'll send this link with the other email. It's basically a clout score. A clout score is a metric for influence. It's somewhere between 1 and 100. And it's sort of a proxy for how influential you are within your social media platforms. Why model marketing strategy after companies in a country where technology option has been... Well, all I did with this article was to present a contrarian view. All semester we've been talking about social. Nothing's better than social. Here's a scenario where technology social is not as good, not as strong, not as effective. The adoption of technology in France is slower. So guess what? You don't force feed a culture something that they're not going to adopt quickly. Why isn't data about customers available to marketing when social networks are used? Why isn't data about customers available to marketing when social networks are used? I'm not sure if I directly understand this question. If someone is pulling data from social and marketing is not getting it, obviously that's a problem. That's not very market oriented because the interfirms in the various silos or the various divisions are not sharing data or knowledge or thoughts. I believe that's what you're asking here. There could be multiple reasons why it isn't shared. It could be politics. It could be cost. There could be geography situations where social is in one location and marketing is in another location. And these people don't know each other. They don't trust each other. So they don't share. Is the product's price and the amount of personal service directly correlated? I think it's pretty directly correlated. You know, there is the adage, the higher the price, the higher the quality. The higher the price, the higher the service you would expect. The higher the quality, the more personal service you're going to get. You're not going to get personal service if you go into a 7-Eleven. You will get a lot of personal service if you go into a Wegmans. Is it true, and do you agree, that it is dangerous to outsource conversations to other organizational platforms, and that is because of interrupted conversations data is not available? Well, let me take the first half of this. I do not agree at all that any of your social should be outsourced to some other firm, that they're doing it in behalf of you, the company. I don't think social is the same thing as an ad agency, where, you would brainstorm with the ad agency, outsource the advertising function, and they would create the ads based on your approval. That's a one-way kind of a scenario. And it's a one-time bullet message. You create the commercial, and the same thing keeps running. But social is different. It's a dialogue. It's a conversation. And I don't think you want anyone outside your own company handling that conversation. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not sure what the second half of this question means. Why isn't there any news of marketing in the U.S. dissuading companies from utilizing social media. I think if you put a little Google query in, you'd find a lot of articles telling U.S. companies they should not be using social media. There's plenty. Privacy is one. Just type in privacy issues and social media, don't use it, and there you go. There's plenty on just terms of service, and such as Facebook changing their terms of service, and now Google again going to change their terms of service. Is France's approach due to the fact there is 14 plus usage of the internet in France compared to the U.S.? I think the technology adoption is part of it, but I think culture is a bigger part of it. If you go to Manhattan, you don't walk up and down the streets and see cafes everywhere where people hang out and chat. The culture in France is different than it is in many other parts of the world. So you need to do what's best, or what fits best, or what's the most strategic in that particular country. Is talking on the phone longer in call centers really something that would work in the U.S.? Now, please understand in this article, there is a difference between inbound and outbound telemarketing. Outbound telemarketing is the telemarketing we hate. It's the telemarketing that annoys us during dinner. Inbound telemarketing is when there's an 800 number and there's either an inside salesperson or a customer salesperson representative of your firm. And people call in for troubleshooting, for help, for questions, and talking longer really could be effective in that situation, that you do care. You're not trying to rush people along. Dell, again, this was 10, 15 years ago, they had an incredible call center in Round Rock, Texas. It was that of legend. This was pre-internet. The only way to order a Dell was through the phone. So the people that you called at that 1-800 blah 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 Dell phone number, these people were your friends. They were helpful. And it didn't make any difference how long the call lasted. Is this author a little overly hostile to the idea of internet and social marketing? It seems like the author sees no value in it. No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think Mr. Kramer here is just trying to give you a counterintuitive view. In order to give you that counterintuitive view, guess what? They have to say or present the argument that there are cases where social's not that great or not as advantageous. Looking at the percentage of families that use internet social media, there seems to be a cultural difference between France and the U.S. Therefore, these strategies actually would be more successful in the U.S. or outside of France. I think it depends. You have to look to see what's the best fit for your brand. There are certain U.S. brands where a style more like what they're doing in France would be a better fit. But in many other cases, think about higher-end B2B. I always love to go back to aircraft engines. Of course, what we do in higher-end B2B is what most things happen in France. How successful would the French model be in the U.S., where social media is becoming a popular channel for communication? I think I just responded to that question. It depends. It depends on the firm, the product, and I think in higher-end, more expensive, complicated B2B scenarios, this model would be better. Are the French missing out on the opportunities by not using social media as much? Yes, they are. We're going to talk about the future of shopping, but this is something that the French are probably not thinking about. The culture in France is very different from the culture in the United States. isn't the way you leverage social media dependent on the culture of the country you're operating in? That is a question, and I agree with what you just said. I think I've already said that. Isn't the French culture the reason why luxury brands do so well over there, and that the French are the best at luxury branding? I would not agree with you that the French are best at luxury branding. Look at the Italians and what they do with automobiles. Look at the Swiss. Look at China. I would not agree. Sure, you may think of some stereotypical high-end luxury French brands. You're not as familiar with the low-end French brands. How about the products they buy in the same way that the French care about the products? Okay. Do Americans care about the products they buy in the same way that the French care about the products? It depends. I don't think we can broadly do a broad swash and say, Americans and French are more similar than not. It depends on the product class, but there are differences within the culture. I do not speak French, and France is not an area of the world that I'm intimately familiar with. I mean, if you want to talk about Latin America, if you want to talk about Japan, you want to talk about other places, I'm more familiar with those locations and their culture. Loyalty programs talk about not treating all your customers the same way. If you are to treat all your customers the same as the article mentions, isn't that going against the best practices of good loyalty programs? I would think that this article is suggesting more of this. Because it's face-to-face, because you're having individual conversations with people, you're not treating everyone the same way. Will the French engage customers? Will the way the French engage customers move towards the American way of engaging customers as the French way of life changes because of the pressures of globalization and an emphasis of higher and higher returns? I'm not sure. France is a rather unique culture. Talk about jingoism and being incredibly proud of your culture. They might move towards the direction of what we do in the United States, but I don't see them doing exactly the way we do it in the United States. No. Next article. What is your personal social media strategy? Have any executives that have been newly engaged in social media used it poorly, that it damaged more than it benefited? Yeah. I think the CEO of Best Buy struggled in the beginning. We know that multiple politicians have struggled tweeting the wrong photos. The problem is that the sample size is still quite small. Because what happens is most executives don't have a personal relationship with their end consumers. I mean, if you go out and do a poll of across the United States and see how many executives people actually do know, I bet you it's less than 10. So there's really, in B2B strategy, there's really little to no advantage for the executives to be involved in social. At least if we think about the chart that I emphasized earlier on page 129. I bet you the executives have strong professional private networks, and when you get a chance, do a Google search on Yammer, which was bought by Microsoft a couple years back. Yammer is Twitter for B2B, and it's private and it's closed. Executives can tweet only to their employees. What are some companies that are creating personal brands? Companies that are creating a personal brand. I mean, I don't know. We can call it a company, but if we think of Bethany Frankel, if we think of Oprah, if we think of, Wolfgang Puck, these are personal brands that are companies. We can think of Tony Hawk. We can think of Danica Patrick. There tends to be a continuum of pure personal brand and celebrity endorser, but there's an awful lot of commonality in multiple ways there. Do you think the use of social media technology is something that will give your younger generations the advantage over executives that do not keep up with the innovations? Could this be a tool for the younger generation to leapfrog mid-level managers who do not keep up with the technology? The only way younger can leapfrog middle is if they know how to do a strategy that middle cannot see. Or the technology is being used strategically. For instance, let's say there is a company that's having problem with their loyalty program, and a younger executive decides to say, okay, we're going to do something via Shopkick and social media. Well, this is where the younger executive who kept up with the technology could, get themselves promoted. That the mid-level manager who's not on top of technology would not see. However, it's the strategy that's most important. The mid-level manager that doesn't know anything about technology can come up with the strategy and find someone to help them operationalize the strategy. So I don't think it's just because you're younger and you know the technology. I think it's more important in a market-oriented kind of mentality that you have an effective strategy given the strengths and weaknesses of your firm. CEOs are busy and important. I can understand that it is good for them to be socially active and to look as though they're in touch with the common man. But is it really in their job description? Should they be dealing with far more pressing issues? Perhaps they should. If the CEO is the CEO of a highly consumer-oriented company, then guess what? They should. But at the same time, CEO signaling often sends a lot of information to various other constituencies. To do a brief tangent, the CEO of Apple just started tweeting within the last month or so. He doesn't tweet very often, but when he does it from meaningful locations, like him being in China in a plant, or him being in a brand new store. And he's really sending that message out to more the Apple employees and the business press and the financial press, more than consumers. Does Denise Morrison have a good social media brand? Yes. How can she improve it? She needs to be in the press more often. She's one of 12 female CEOs. Because of that, she's in the Fortune's, what is it? Let's see real quick. I promise not to get off on too far of a tangent. It's probably in leadership at the moment. 10 most powerful women. The latest issue of Fortune magazine is the top 50 most powerful women. Denise Morrison is number 19 on that list. She could increase her personal brand if she was out in the open as much as Sheryl Sandberg or Marissa Mayer from Yahoo. As an aside, what are your thoughts on network neutrality? Talk about a curveball. I could do a whole video on this alone. I am a fan of open. Open is better. Open is, can it always be open? I don't know. I am happy that Comcast gives me my broadband connection, but at the same time, I know that because of costing in corporate scenarios, there are certain customers that get a faster speed than others. They do not have pure network neutrality. think about network neutrality more as an ideal, and I love the ideal. And I also understand that as an ideal, it's not universal, it's not possible. Some governments really would never fly with complete, pure network neutrality. How would you draw the line in the sand between what you want to share with your employees and the public to keep your privacy intact? Well, sharing and privacy, okay, are two contradictory terms. If you're sharing, by definition, you're being less private. You can use internal networks if you want to share information with your employees that the public will not see. You can share other, perfect example. Yammer is great for internal employees. Twitter is great for external public constituents. Divide your messages up between various social networks. What limits should there be, if any, for a top executive or leader using social media? I don't see there being any limits. If anything, I would talk about resources, and the most important resource, as we alluded earlier, is time. I would not want the executive tweeting for the sake of tweeting if there wasn't a strategic reason to why the executive needs to tweet. I hate these articles that says, only 44 of the Fortune 500 CEOs are on Twitter. Meaning that all these other CEOs better get their act together. Well, what are you talking about? Why does the CEO of FedEx need to tweet? And what would he be tweeting that's really of value to anyone? If there isn't a strategic reason to do it, you don't do it. If it isn't part of, if the social media, the utilization of social media does not align with any strategic business objective or mission statement, you don't do it. But if part of your mission statement is open communication and the buck stops here, then okay, guess what? You should be tweeting. Should there be any boundaries a leader should not cross when using social media? Yeah. If you are the leader of the firm, your job is really to have the professional persona. Tweeting about your vacation in a very extravagant location when your company just lost $250 million and you got a $10 million bonus is probably not the smartest use of your social media. What are some companies where leaders using social media effectively? I'll say Red Bull, because Red Bull's entire marketing effort is social. They do nothing other than social. They do not have traditional broadcast radio or TV advertising. It's all social. I'd say Virgin as well. Virgin America constantly uses clout to upgrade people from cabin to first class, or give some highly, highly important influencers with high clout scores fares for the weekend so that they can have some fun, but at the same time talk about Virgin. If you develop your own blog that makes references to information you have learned from situations within a company you work for, can referencing the information, even if it's not directly referencing your organization, create issues for you at work? Hell yeah. If you are disclosing confidential information in a public forum, you're in trouble. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no other way to say it than that. Yeah. You're basically whistleblowing or leaking secrets in the public. Are there most firms, at least legal departments, are creating social media marketing policies that, you go to orientation and guess what? That's one of the things you do in a half-day session. Find out what you can and cannot do on social platforms. You are a representative of the firm. Are there platforms that allow you to manage all your social media channels in one place? It seems like it can be a full-time job just to manage your social media presence in a way that makes it effective. Yeah, there's a couple platforms out there. I think one of the most popular at the moment is Hootsuite. Hootsuite would look something like this. It's kind of a one window, and this would be your Facebook tab and your Twitter tab and your Pinterest tab and your other tab and this tab and your Tumblr tab, and you can do that. There's a couple of them out there. There's dashboards. A lot of these are in the B2B space. Radiant6, Spreadfast, Trax, which is based in New York City, and that's who the Super Bowl social media team is using. Do you think that it's a cultural or an industry specific when it comes to those executive leaders who use social media and those who do not? Is it a cultural? It could be cultural. Could it be industry specific? I think it's more B2B, B2B versus B2C. But I'm going to keep coming back to the same thing that I say. It has to be coming from somewhere strategically. Tweeting for the sake of tweeting, I highly suggest, highly suggest, when you get a chance, and I send you this link, watch this 3.5-minute video on Angela and what Burberry is doing with social. Burberry is using social strategically. There is a reason why they're doing it. They're not doing it because it's neat. They're not doing it because it's fun. They're doing it because it's the best way to reach their customers. It is their main communication channel. And for their customers, this is their differentiation from the other luxury brands. This is a spectacular video. So what I'm going to do now, folks, is just so that none of these videos go too long, I'm going to pause for a second, or I'm going to stop.